Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Bisolans, and every Saturday we look at some stories shaping our continent. Before diving into this week's topics, we'll take a quick look at SBM's kidnap report in Nigeria. Then we'll examine the sudden resignation of Ahmed Abubakar, the Nigeria Intelligence Agency's Director General, in our headline story. What is behind this surprising move, and what does this mean for national security? After that, we'll discuss the latest confrontation between the police and members of the Islamic Movement of Nigeria in Abuja, which turned deadly. We'll bring you the latest on this tragic incident and explore its wider implications. Finally, we'll also touch on Nigeria's return to the oil export scene after a brief hiatus. What does this mean for regional politics and the global oil market? Joining me for in-depth analysis and expert insights on these critical stories is Confidence Makari, Senior Security Analyst at SBM Intelligence. Welcome, Confidence.
Hello, Peace. It's good to be back here.
Yeah, it's good to have you again. All right, so
Mm.
diving quickly into our kidnap reports in SBM, I just want to ask you, what are the primary drivers behind Nigeria's kidnapping industry right now?
So one thing our listeners should know is that um, kidnap for ransom is not just any kind of crime. It's now a lucrative business. It has this whole industry on its own, unlike normal businesses where they get taxed. No, there's no taxation in this. It's a whole industry, and it has a lot of players in it. So at some points, given how lucrative it is, there are accusations that some members of Nigerian security forces are involved. So some people have theorized that poverty is a driving factor for why many people go into kidnapping for ransom, while other people have attributed it to the poor state of the economy, which is driving people into poverty and into desperate means such as kidnapping for ransom. On another hand, one could also link it to the availability of small arms and light weapons, many of which do not really take so much resources to manufacture, and there are so many manufacturing companies, even at low level or low scale here in Nigeria, that provide these weapons for people who are looking to go into these kinds of crimes. So there is a whole lot of factors, driving factors that make this a menace. So it depends on what exactly you're looking at as a causative factor.
All right. So you also worked on the kidnap report last year. So compared to last year, what has changed with regards to the kidnap industry?
Well, nothing really significant has changed apart from the amount of money. I think one thing we should note is the amount of money that has been requested and paid in between both years has been, should I say, significant. This year, we found that about nearly 11 billion naira was requested as ransom, with the kidnappers getting just about 10%, between 9.5 and 10%. That's about 1.048 billion naira compared to last year where it was I'm trying to get the figure off, and it's not, I'm sorry, I can't, it's not really coming to my head at the moment. But one thing I can tell you for a fact that is the figures, especially when it comes to the ransom, is higher. And also I think the death toll is also higher. We are currently looking at 2024 figures where we are having over 7,000 people kidnapped. So specifically, we are having about 7,568 people kidnapped, compared to about 3,500 and something last year. So that's almost times two in numbers. And then if you look at people, total number of people killed too, um, you also see a significant jump. Last year, we had about 500 incidents of kidnapping in the country. This year, we're currently having more than that, and and also the number of people killed. So it just gives one the picture that as the days go by, the kidnap crisis is becoming a lot more problematic. It's becoming a lot more widespread. It's becoming much more metastasized, and I think one could directly attribute it to how much the economy has sunken in the past few months, where people has become so desperate that you, even if you look deeply into the reports, you get to see ridiculous things asked as ransom. Sometimes food, sometimes cigarettes, sometimes bottles of water, and so many other things that indicate that it's now a battle for survival, much more than it is an aggrandizement for self enrichment.
All right, so confidence based on the demography, are there regional variations? Like, are there geopolitical zones where kidnap is more prominent? Maybe men are more kidnapped than women or something. Are there variations to this kidnap? Is there a particular target audience, like maybe people in the academics, or just let us know who are the targets, like who are people targeted when it comes to kidnap?
Lately, the kidnappers do not spare anybody. They do not spare anybody, an academic, a politician, a government official, normal people, students, even babies. 2 months old, 3 months, 4 months old babies are also adopted. So the kidnap epidemic doesn't spare anyone. But if you look at the gender disparity, you get to find that more women were reportedly kidnapped than men. But I do not. One of the reasons why that is so, if you watch very well, I use the word reported. When there is this form of reporting that has been done in Nigeria, that the media is more likely to make it a point to note if it is a woman that is abducted compared to if it is a man. And more often than not, when the kidnap cases are reported, we do not get to see the disparity made in the reporting. So we could not find for the entire number of incidents, about 7,588 people kidnapped, the full spectrum of gender disparity. We only could find it around 1,000. So that's not much to go by. But if you look at the regional disparity, yes, on average, you get more abductions in the northwest and in the north central than you get in the northeast and the south. So cities like Zamfara, Katsina, Kaduna, as well as in the north central Niger state. It also does the same thing for the mass abductions, where these states tends to be the one that lead. But in the mass abductions, you get to see a significant amount of
Yeah, confidence. I lost you. Okay,
a significant amount of rise in numbers. So, for instance, for no Taraba, these are the only two states in the period that experienced mass. Yeah, did you?
all right. I think we lost confidence. So we're discussing the SBM kidnap reports. I completely forgot to mention the title of the report before we started. So it's titled Grim Reaping Economics of Nigeria's Kidnap Industry, a 2024 update. Okay, confidence, you are back. Can you wrap up your answer to that question? We lost you at some point. Confidence, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. You're back.
All right. So I was trying to say that the North has more kidnap incidents, more victims killed, more kidnappers killed on average than the South. And so three states, Katsina, Kaduna, and Zamfara, I think make up to about 30% of the number of people kidnapped. And even in terms of mass abductions, there's not so much going on in three or four other geopolitical zones compared to these other zones. So one could say that in terms of kidnapping, the north is a lot more dangerous than the south.
All right, thank you. There's still a lot we can discuss on the kidnap reports, but I would encourage everyone listening to check out our website for more information on that. All right, so moving on to our first major story for today, which is about the resignation of the Nigeria Intelligence Agency Director General. So I just want to make sure that we're not, just giving him the wrong or misinterpreting what his role is. What exactly is the function of Nigeria Intelligence Director General or that particular commission?
All right. So many people tend to mispronounce the name, and it's the civilian foreign intelligence arm of the Nigerian government. So think of it in the context of the CIA, but for Nigeria. So there are different kinds of intelligence agencies. There are the ones that are responsible for domestic intelligence. It could be civilian in the form of what we have, like in the US, we have it in the form of the FBI. In the UK, it's the MI5 or Military Intelligence Section 5, and in Nigeria it's DSS. So the military also has its own intelligence arm. I think in Nigeria it's known as the Director of Military Intelligence. Director of Military Intelligence. So the NIA exists to collect foreign civilian intelligence. So it's not much to be known. It's not really that well known in Nigeria because most of the time when it's in the news, a few times it's in the news, it's in the news for the wrong reasons. If you cast your mind back to 2017, where a huge sum of money was found in an apartment in Ikoyi in Lagos, and then it said it was directly traced by the EFCC to the then Director General of the agency, who said the money was for operations. So this is the second time it's making the news in as many years. So its Director General resigned last week. So the circumstances that led to his resignation had to do with what insiders tell SBM, that it's related to the poor performance of security services or security agencies in the country, particularly his own agency. So the president, Bola Tinubu, has not really been satisfied with what has been done. And I do think that if there is a particular immediate cause, it cannot be unconnected to the protests that began at the start of this month, where in some major northern cities like Kano and Katsina, or even in Zaria, we were seeing Russian flags being raised, which started as a trickle down, which started in a trickle rather, and then it grew to so many more, so much so that the police had to step in to arrest the alleged manufacturer of these flags. So I think the government interpreted this thing as, should I say, an influence spreading move by some sections of the society, especially in positions of the government, which the intelligence services could have picked beforehand. So I think part of that grievance may also have led to the resignation or the firing of the Director General of the State Security Services, that's Yusuf Bichi, who has been replaced by somebody from the agency called Adeola Ajayi. So some other people also say that it might be because these two men have lost the favor of the National Security Advisor, that's Malam Nuhu Ribadu, who is supervising, whose office supervises these particular agencies. So that's the long and short of the matter. So I also do think that partly it might also be due to the fact that they've stayed in these positions for a long time, and I also do think that they are due for retirement. But one thing one could notice about Nigeria's politics is that whenever these people fall out of favor, it is very easy for them to be taken off the chopping block as soon as the president is displeased.
All right. So when we look at everything you said right now, is it a leadership problem or a systemic problem? Like in the sense that, so new people will come in. Do you think that when these new people come in, there will be any change? Is this more of a personal problem? Like, oh, the people that were there before were the reasons why things were not working? Or is this more of a systemic issue with regard to our intelligence agency or our security service in Nigeria?
I don't think it's systemic because it's hiring a new service chief or a new agency chief is just going to be a new spokes in an old wheel. The problem with security in Nigeria is the way the outlook of the security agencies are designed. So, for instance, we do not have a national security facing security agencies. The security services are tilted towards regime change. So, for instance, one of the reasons why Tinubu might have been so miffed to the point of firing his intelligence chiefs might be because he felt that the protests were targeted at him, despite the fact that it was targeted at the worsening economic situations in Nigeria. So he might think that it's politically motivated, and the people who were there, the intelligence chiefs, did not do enough to prevent it. So one would expect to that kind of a scenario that their own successor will be very, very keen to avoid their mistakes in quotes and not doing enough to stifle political dissent through whatever means that they might arise, even if such means are protest against hunger, hardship, and starvation. So it's not designed in Outlook to protect people. It's not designed with the national security focus in view. It's designed to protect whoever the man or possibly woman in the future in Aso Rock is. So I don't really have much faith that the new crop of leaders that has been put in charge of these agencies are going to do much, especially in agencies that actually require a shift and a paradigm shift in operations.
All right, thank you, Confidence. So moving on to our next story, which is about Nigeria Police Force and the arrest and detention of 97 Shiite members for prosecution. I used to pronounce it as Shiite till I realized it's Shiite. So it's taking a lot of efforts to remember that it's Shiite. All right, so it seems like the
They're not
Shiite,
shy.
it seems this group, the IMN, Islamic Movement of Nigeria, it seems they've had a very problematic relationship with the government over the years. I want to walk us through like a brief history of what has happened, the events up to this moment, the massacre, the Zaria massacre, the arrest of their leader. Just walk us through a brief history of this particular movement in relation with the government.
All right. So the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, popularly known as the Shiites, a religious minority. So Nigeria is made up of at least 51% Muslim in terms of religious demographic spread. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So Nigeria is made up of 51% Muslims, at least in terms of religious spread. And in Islam, there is this centuries-old divide between the Sunnis and the Shiites. Most of Nigeria's Muslims belong to the Sunnis, and about 1 million of them are Shiites. The Shiites are those who believe that leadership of the Islamic world should be for the descendants of Prophet Muhammad's daughter. I think Fatima is her name, if I'm not mistaken. But the Sunnis do not believe. I think the leadership of the Muslim world for the Sunnis belong to Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law. So that divide has been there in the Middle East, and then it's circulated much into the world. But most of the world's Muslims are Sunni in orientation. But in Nigeria, the Shiites have been viewed with suspicion, having had ties with Iran. So most of the or successive governments have kind of seen their affiliation with Iran, which is the largest Shia nation in the world, has been a threat to national security. So given that Nigeria is not really a place where religious minorities thrive and there's a lot of religious persecution, it just seems natural that the majority Sunni population is going to turn on them. So part of their own survival means has been to highlight their plight to the world by holding regular processions across northern cities, such like the FCT, I think also parts of Jigawa and mostly in Kaduna. And sometimes also in Kano. So they hold these processions regularly. I think as recently as the start of the war with Hamas, between Israel and Hamas in October, they also had a series of pro-Palestinian marches in Abuja and also in Kaduna and Zaria cities. So the Nigerian government, as I said previously, has always viewed them with suspicion, and they've always made sure to clamp down very hard on them since as far back as 2010, when I think there was a particular port in Lagos that discovered caches of weapons that were from Iran, and then it was said to be destined for the group in Nigeria. So the clampdown has been so hard that as of 2015, their leader Ibrahim El-Zakzaki was arrested and detained by Nigeria Security Services following an altercation between them and the Nigerian army that led to about 348 of their members being killed in Zaria by the Nigerian army. So the current crisis or the current incident happened in the FCT, where the police allegedly said that members of the IMN attacked their own officers and killed about 2 of them. And so which led to the police to detain about 97 of their members in the FCT. Yeah.
All All right, that was a very comprehensive history. Yeah, because I was going to ask, like, what circumstances led to this recent arrest? How has the police been able to justify? Were they violent? What exactly happened this time in Abuja?
So I would not, I would take the police's narration of events with a pinch of salt, because
Yeah.
one thing I will give the Nigerian government credit for is their ability, or is their success in downgrading the ability of this particular set of people to take up arms against the Nigerian state. Like, the Nigerian security services have had their eyes on them. It doesn't really mean that if they want to take up arms against the state, they don't know where to look or how to get them. I mean, they are from the north, that is a very volatile environment. So largely their restrictions have been self-imposed, not necessarily due to this, not necessarily due to the ability of the Nigerian state, but I still have to give the Nigerian government credit for keeping an eye on them. But for this particular one, the police said they were attacked. The mode of attack wasn't explicitly stated. It wasn't said what kind of weapons they used. It wasn't explicitly stated how the police officers who were said to be killed were killed. So there are a lot of gaps in the police's own reporting that one would need to take with a lot of caution. Yes, it is true that the group is proscribed. They were proscribed in 2019 by a federal high court, and so whenever it's quite expected that the police would treat them as outcasts and clamp down heavily on them. So which of course pales in comparison to the police's own reporting that it was the Shiite members that attacked them first. So these are some of the disparities and inconsistencies we have to take into account whenever we listen to the police's own narration of events.
All right. So, but I'm just thinking, what are the human rights implications of Nigerian government's actions against the IMN? How have international human rights organizations viewed this? And what do you think, just looking at the future, what are the potential results of this particular thing that just happened? Because I'm thinking about it that if their leaders been arrested once, there's been a time where they were massacred, en masse, and even now with this, would that be a time where there will be this tipping point where we would have like an explosion where they would really react and attack even, uh, later in future? What exactly is this going to result in?
So the last time the international human rights organizations or even domestic ones took attention of their attention on the Shiites and their plight was when Ibrahim El-Zazaki was in DSS detention. He and his wife. I think he has also lost about 2 sons to security forces brutality in recent years. But in the present terms, there's not much. I think their capital, the international human rights concerns, and their capital has been exhausted in trying to get their leader, that's Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, away from out of detention, by which he was subjected to by the Buhari administration. So they've gotten him out, and their attention has been diversified the other way. They've come to, since the group is proscribed, there is precious little that human rights groups can do or say. But one thing I would say in terms of the future projection of how this thing is going to turn out is that for each group have their own breaking points. We have to give the IMA a lot of credit for not resorting to arms so far. But the question then becomes, how long are they going to continue to suffer what they are suffering from the Nigerian government? So if they continue in this particular light, it's not so hard to envision that the younger generation of Shiites who are coming up after this with practically no hope of survival outside of the conventional rules by which they are already subjected to, that they're not going to take up arms, especially in a country where you have more arms in the hands of civilians than you have in the hands of security agencies.
All right. Thank you, Confidence. So moving on to our last story, which is we're moving to Africa, talking about Niger and Benin. So Niger has resumed crude oil export via Benin after a dispute between the countries altered. So I just want to give like people listening a background to this story. Can you provide an overview? What brought about this particular conflict? Why did they stop the exports, considering the economic value it has to both countries?
So the one thing we should understand is that there is a lot of, despite all the talks of renewable energy, green energy transition and the likes, there's still a lot of international demand for fossil fuels, especially oil. And one of the key destinations for, or one of the key markets for oil exports, especially from Africa, is China. So China has invested a lot in energy security to the point of securing a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And so in Sahel, it has tried to get energy security in terms of, by virtue of getting into deals with Niger, where Niger will supply the country oil through a pipeline that transits through Benin and then over to the Gulf of Guinea. So the pipeline is about 1,200 miles long. China built it in Agadem oil field, and it's supposed to transport oil from the port of from Agadem to the port of Cotonou in Benin. So what it was designed to do was to help Niger achieve an almost five-fold increase in oil production. So the deal is about $400 million. It was signed in April of, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. But the problem was that the deal was going on very well, despite we not knowing how much Benin was supposed to earn in terms of transit fees. But something happened last year with the coup in Niger in July. So ECOWAS slapped sanctions on Niger. Benin followed suit by stopping the transfer of the oil to its ports in Cotonou. So ever since ECOWAS decided to lift those sanctions, it has been a problem between both countries. Even before then, there were even attacks, there were pipeline attacks by a rebel group in Niger that were sympathetic to the ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. But recently this week, both countries agreed to restore the pipeline, and then oil started flowing. I think the current tranche of oil that has been transported from Niger through to Benin is going to land in China by October. But at some point during the point of the conflict, the Nigerian officials, given how Benin was stubborn enough to follow through with ECOWAS sanctions, they tried the mold the plan to reroute the oil through Chad or Cameroon, but at that point it wasn't feasible, and China wasn't really to fund that kind of double expenses, so they had to wait the whole sanctions regime out.
All right. So how has China's investment and involvement in this infrastructure deepened the conflict or the problems in this particular region?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Can you rephrase the question?
All right. Yeah. So I was asking about China's involvement. Yes. How has China's involvement affected or deepened the tensions between Niger and Benin?
I don't think China's involvement has deepened tensions. For what it's worth, before the coup in July, it hasn't. What it did was to even bring them closer. I think there is kind of a mutual dependency where Niger provides the oil and Benin is the transit point. Kind of a mutually beneficial relationship where Benin gets transit fees. But China is not the kind of country or the kind of global superpower or regional power, whatever power it is, that looks at human rights and democracy. It just wants to get business done. Whatever the government in office is, be it a democracy or a military government. So it wasn't really happy when these sanctions took place, and it's also worked very hard to get the pipelines flowing once again. So as soon as the sanctions were lifted, there was a go between China and there was a go between Niger and Benin to get the pipeline up and running again. So I wouldn't really say that it has been a force for destabilization. So China just wants to get its energy supplies and keep it moving, not necessarily trying to destabilize countries. But if the destabilization comes out of it and then it will work to Chinese interests, fine. But I don't really think they are much about trying to destabilize them, especially as a government policy.
Okay, but has anything been done to address the security challenges that led to the halt in the first place, like the rebel attack, for example, and now that they are resuming the oil export?
Oh, nothing so far. I don't really think there is anything that they would do. The Patriotic Liberation Front, which is the rebel group in charge, has not really been that keen. I think in June, following the last attack, Nigeria's government actually moved to try to arrest some of the group members, and I do think that to an extent it sort of stopped the attacks for a period. And since then, it's been 2 months. We haven't really gotten to hear about any of such attacks again. But it's not ruling. This is not ruling out the fact that in the future we could also see many of these kind of attacks. But for now, everything seems to be going on well. And I do think that in the interest of both countries, especially for Niger, that is dealing with a lot of armed groups, this is its own cash flow. I think the IMF, as of the start of this year, projected this economy to grow by about 5.6%, and the its oil exports being a key driver in this economic forecast. So I think it has enough incentive to see that the supply disruption is kept to the barest minimum.
All right, thank you so much, Confidence. So I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm going to go back to our kidnap reports that we started with. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to wrap up. So, on just thinking about it, we are calling it an industry, which shows that it's now something very lucrative that every Tom, Dick, and Harry is going into to earn something. So, considering that the food insecurity crisis in Nigeria is going up, and then our inflation is skyrocketing, prices are high. Is there any end in sight to this problem? How can it be curtailed in the long run? Because people will keep paying ransoms, and to keep giving incentives to the kidnappers to go on. But is there any way that this can be curbed in the short term?
There are no easy answers. There are no easy answers. On the government's own side, they have tried to curtail the problem by going after kidnap gangs, trying to cut supply, arm supply to the groups, and so many things, even to the point of trying to outlaw ransom payments, but it doesn't really work. For the hard, difficult path towards stopping this crisis, it will have to be, I think, people will have to make that sacrifices, a very difficult sacrifice of simply not paying ransom to the kidnappers, and it's going to lead to the loss of lives. It's going to lead to a lot of loss of lives, especially for kidnap victims. So that's should I say, the best possible scenario in ending this crisis. So it's a difficult road. It's a very difficult road, but it's not something that is not doable. But one thing I do know, that a situation that might force people into this particular option of not paying a ransom is if the economic decline continues and people's purchasing power is low, and the other means of raising money for the kidnap groups in terms of ransom payments dry up. I'm talking about personal funds, the government's coming through, the public, social media, and everything. If these other sources dry up, I do think that that's one major area where it's going to really force the kidnappers to recalibrate their strategy and the likes. But as far as those avenues continue to remain, I do think that we are not going to be seeing the end of this crisis anytime soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Confidence, for participating in today's episode.
No problem, like that.
All right, so to all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. For deeper insights into our kidnap reports and our work, visit our website at sbmintel.com. And remember to connect with us on social media. You can find us on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Bye.